Well, thanks for joining us tonight for the Minot Area Chamber EDC Government Affairs Committee Candidate Forum for the Minot Mayoral Race. This is our last candidate forum ahead of the June 2022 primary. My name is Mark Lyman. I am the Economic Development Specialist for the Minot Chamber EDC and a member of the Government Affairs Committee. Thanks to everyone who's tuning in to watch the forum, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, or if you're watching this after the fact. We really appreciate your participation. If you are watching live online and would like to propose a question to be asked of all of the candidates tonight, please feel free to drop that question in the chat or comment section of the Facebook page or the YouTube page that you are viewing. We will take those suggestions and ask them if possible. We're already getting 5 or 6 or 10 coming in right now, so we'll take them as they come in. If we do see some repeats in the question, we won't ask the same question again. So, and there's a good chance that we won't get to everyone's question tonight. So we do apologize in advance. We are scheduled to go until 7:30, but we could be done early, depending on the brevity of the candidates and their responses and the amount of input from the public. We do have 3 candidates running for the mayor of Minot. One is an incumbent, 2 are challengers. Let's get to know our candidates right off the bat. Please take 1 minute, each of you, to introduce yourself and tell us why you are running for mayor of Minot. And just so everyone knows, the candidates have been encouraged to keep their comments to 1 minute. So we will work to keep them to 1 minute. Tom Ross, you are the first one. Tom, would you please go?
Thank you, Mark, and I want to thank the Minot Chamber of Commerce EDC for sponsoring this. It's just one more step in having a well-educated electorate to help make those decisions for who sits in these seats. The reason I'm running for mayor is because I believe in my heart of hearts we need to have a change at the top. We need a leader who's going to lead for all of Minot. We need a leader whose record of service in the community is going to provide good, sound judgment and working together with all the council, working together with the legislative team, working together with all of Minot to find solutions to carry us forward. We got to be aggressive in economic development. We got to produce victories in economic development. We got to produce victories in tourism, and we got to produce victories for all of our residents, whether you're in the valley or live on the hills. I'm going to fight for small business, and that's why I'm running. Okay,
thank you, Tom. Mr. Mayor, Shaun, would you please go next?
Thank you, Mark, and as well, thank you to the Chamber EDC for the opportunity to hold these forums and get to know the candidates well. I'm running for mayor for a second and final term simply on the basis that over the last 4 years, there has been a tremendous amount of growth and turnaround within the community, both internal to City Hall itself and external. 4 years ago, I'd set out a number of different platform goals and going up and down that line, challenging, but we have met those goals. We take a look at the goals of standing together as a community, and absolutely that has been a point that has been well served. We take a look around at the economic growth that we've had over the last 4 years and pairing with all of our partners, and not just with some, but all of our partners in watching that process move forward. I've been a very strong advocate at all levels for the city of Minot, and that record stands strong, as well as my professional life as mayor and my private life before and will continue after. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Next, Miranda, let us get to know you and tell us why are you running for mayor of Minot.
Great, thank you. I just want to thank you again as well for having us here. I want to thank the people who are in the audience and the people who will be watching this later and are watching it live for being engaged, involved citizens. It's really important, and that's part of the reason I wanted to run as mayor. I think a dynamic candidate selection is important for our community. It's important for the voters. A little bit about me. Over the past 8 years, I've been blessed to serve the people of Minot, first as a city council alderman starting in 2014, and then currently as a public school board member. My term ends in June. In these roles, my leadership style has grown, and I've taken on some of the toughest challenges our community has to face. I take great pride in my listening and problem solving and critical thinking skills. I tend to think of myself as a perpetual learner, and I strive to collaborate to be an impactful community leader and role model. And I hope that I would be selected as the next mayor.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Okay, let's get into our first set of questions. We're going to start with Shaun on this first one. and then we'll just go in order. Shaun, what are your highest priorities for the next 4 years if you were to be elected? 1 minute.
It's a great question. When we talk about the highest priorities, number one always comes back to flood control, simply because it is such a budget impactful component. We currently are on a 20-year build to 2042. We need to get that down to 2035. I helped lead that charge down at the legislature this past session. I've actually worked very closely with legislative leadership, and we've got traction down there, and now it's going to be a matter of getting that budget priority pushed this next session. So we take a look at the economic development component. We've seen a great not just turnaround, but progress in our downtown, but throughout the community. Take a look at North Hill. We've got the Magic City Discovery Center and a lot of other quality of life factors that build into economic development. That also is inclusive of small and existing business. One of the other big components here as we're working forward is taking care of our infrastructure and investing in that infrastructure. Meanwhile, I think addressing the issue of inflation that we're seeing right now.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, same question. What are your highest priorities of the next 4 years should you become mayor?
I look back on the survey that that was recently done by the citizens, and I look at the highest priorities of the citizens and the citizens that I spoke with when I was collecting signatures to run essentially as mayor. Number one priority being overall maintenance of streets and sidewalks. I really want to hyper-focus on the critical infrastructure within our community, the things that impact everyday life as a citizen in Minot. Not to say that the other aspects are not as important. Flood control is definitely important. That has a long-term benefit to the entire city. Once it's complete, it needs to continue on the same path and get completed as quickly as possible. Economic development is important. All of these things are important, but I would like to continue to focus on those critical infrastructures, things like street maintenance, fire, police, the things that impact everyday citizens' lives.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, finish us off on this. What are your highest priorities over the next 4 years should you become mayor?
You know, thank you, Mark. We have to get flood control. We've got to push that to the end, and we've got to speed it up. So I do agree with the mayor on that. And we have to become more aggressive on economic development. The citizens have given us money to attract business to Minot. We've got to use it, or in my opinion, we give it back to them. We've got to be more aggressive. We've got to start producing victories in economic development. That's going to help our city grow. And when our city grows, we all share. We all share in the energy. We all share in the costs. And when we grow, there's an opportunity for our property taxes to stay level, if not go down. Yes, infrastructure needs work. We've got to focus on that. We've got to focus on holding our budget, holding our department heads accountable in producing a well-projected budget on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, so each of you has already mentioned this at least briefly. I want to dive into it a little bit more specifically. This next question will go first to Miranda. What specifically would you do in your role as the mayor of Minot as it relates to flood protection going forward? And would you do anything different compared to what's been done the last 10 years?
Flood control began after the 2011 flood. I was instrumental in helping kind of guide the path beginning in 2014 when I joined council, and I kind of want to see that continue. Like I said, the foot to be on the gas for that. We're going to have to work with our legislative partners here in the state and at a federal level to continue to keep pressure on, because protecting, I should say, just one part of the community is not beneficial to all of us. We need to make sure that we're getting that east side of town equal protection as quickly as possible, and basically just by keeping those conversations in the forefront of the citizens, in the forefront of our legislators at the state level and at the federal level.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, you're next. Then what specifically would you do in your role as mayor when it comes to flood protection going forward?
The first thing I would do is sit down with the Minot legislative team and Minot congressional delegation to really start focusing in on how we can fast track this. And by fast tracking this, we're going to save millions and millions and millions of dollars to the taxpayers, not only in the build out, as we've talked about before, but also in flood insurance premiums. So that's going to be the focus. Look, we've got great people on staff who are going to be able to testify and be able to work it down in Bismarck. But we have to get to a point to where we used to have that group from Minot. Our legislators used to be feared in Bismarck. And I want to get to that point again to where we can actually make something happen in Bismarck and bring back real dollars to Bismarck for flood control.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, you get to close us out on this one. What would you what would you do in your role as mayor of Minot going forward?
Thank you, Mark. One of the impactful points that's been driven the last couple of sessions is working more closely with the Souris River, the SRJB, Souris River Joint Board. They're instrumental as they're the entity that's building the flood control and helping them with our rural community partners, because then it's not just the Minot delegation, but it is a coalition, a regional coalition to help build that support down in Bismarck, which has helped change that narrative from which was about $168 million, what was allocated kind of early on in the flood control building phases, to now the narrative that we need to get this to the end. And I think a lot of legislators had that misconception that $168 million got us to the end. Last legislative session, we changed that narrative, and now it is building a wide coalition, and not just with legislators, but the SRJB and the governor as well. Good news is Fargo diversion has been taken care of legislatively. Now it's time to put that focus on Minot.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. I've got one more question from our list of those that are kind of preset, and then we've got about only a dozen or so here that are coming in, so we'll get to those here too. We're going to come back to the beginning. Tom, we'll come back to you on this question. This is one that we asked in previous forums. If you had a magic wand and could have one big wish list item as an improvement to the city, and it has to tie back to something that city government's responsible for, not Parks and Rec, not something else, but city government, what would that wish be and why?
The wish would be to be completed with flood control. Bottom line is that the dollars freed up from the completion of flood control can be put into so many things: quality of life, property tax relief. That's where we're behind the eight ball. Right now, we have been focused on flood control. We're spending a lot of money on flood control, and that has to be done. But if we can fast track that, get it done, that frees up a whole nother revenue source that we can really make this city grow in all aspects: quality of life, economic development. There's so much that can be done.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, you got that big wish list item. What would it be? You can wave your magic wand.
How could you not say flood control for all of the reasons that Alderman Ross talked about? The reality is with that project is we've got bonds that are going to go out for 40 years, tying up those sales tax dollars for such a long period of time. That is instrumental because the reality is when the flood insurance rates go up in the valley, we're going to see valuations go down on those dwellings. Now, that also correlates to the folks on the Hill because it's going to be drawing in less revenue from those homes. And if the mill levy stays flat, that also puts pressure on those folks from the Hill. So it's impactful across the board. And let's not forget the big issue here, it's safety. We saw the city cut in half in 2011. We know that Minot floods historically at different levels. It also has impact on the Minot Air Force Base when we talk about the convoys. So it's impactful not just to the city of Minot, but regionally and nationally and internationally.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, finish us off on this one. You have a magic wand. You can get one big improvement to our community. What would that wish be?
I'd like to say something other than flood control, but I'm going to say the same answer.
Okay.
But I'm going to say it for a different reason. All of the reasons that the gentleman before me stated are very valid. But as a person who literally lives 3 blocks from here with a river in my backyard, I can vividly remember going through the flood, the days leading up to it, the days afterward. And I never personally want to go through that again. And I don't want the 12,000 people that were displaced in our community to ever have to go through that again, nor do I want the people who have left and then backfilled and don't understand what that meant and what that circumstance was like. I don't want them to have to deal with that. There's a lot of reasons, but I will tell you intrinsically it is the emotional piece. I don't want people to have to go through that again.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with Shaun on this next question. So Shaun, the question comes in, What are the principles upon which your decisions are based? And can you give us an example of that? What are the principles upon which your decisions are based? And can you give us an example of that?
It's a great question, Mark. When we talk about principles when it comes to making decisions for the community, I think it's taking a look at the fundamental priorities that have been laid out by the community, whether it's the Magic City aspirations from the council itself, and then the impact to the individuals and the community as a whole. I try to leave emotions out of it. When it comes to politics, it's too easy to get emotional over issues. I will use the Ann Street Bridge as the example of this. Absolutely, there is a tremendous amount of connection to the old bridge, the walking path that I'm sure for 100 years has been taken. But we have so many other priorities that need attention within the community, those dollars that can be used, whether it's sidewalks, whether it's sewer and water replacement, flood control, so many other necessities. I mean, we have a wastewater treatment plant that's going to be required in the not-too-distant future of about $30 million. So take the emotion out of it, look at it for what the value is to the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, same question. What are the principles upon which your decisions are based, and can you give us an example of that?
So my personal principles fall back to my ethics. In my professional career, ethics is a big deal. We have to take continuing education every 2 years that includes ethics just to keep my license intact. And I think back on forums where the state insurance commissioner has told us many times, you need to think ethically and you need to frame the circumstances. If the circumstance was to end up in the newspaper, or telling your mom, is it something that's going to make you cringe or be embarrassed? So each topic that comes before the city, my perspective is literally my personal ethics.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, finish us off on this. What principles are you using to base your decisions on?
I'm very proud to answer this question. It comes from my parents and it comes from my upbringing. My parents were both hardworking people in the city of Minot. Dad worked heavy equipment construction for 40 years. I believe his hands helped build the skyline of Minot, and his heart helped build a beautiful family. That's my guiding principle. I look at it as hard work. Coming into this position, it's going to be hard work. You got to be humble, and you got to be able to take the blinders off and see a problem from all sides. And you've got to welcome all visions coming in. The more sets of eyes you have looking at a problem, the more opportunity you have at finding a creative solution to that problem. In case of the Ann Street Bridge, the fact is it had nothing to do with flood control, but it has everything to do with future opportunities that could be built into the city of Minot.
Okay, thank you, Tom. This next question, I'd like us to do it in maybe 30 seconds, because I think it's going to be a quick one. You're either going to have something and you can mention it, or you might even have to pass, and that's fine if you do. The question comes in, and we'll start with Miranda. The question is, name one thing you have supported and or voted for that you would not currently support.
I wish I wasn't first so I could have a minute to think on this one.
That's why I'm giving you 30 seconds, so you can pass it on, the hot potato, to your compadres.
Honestly, anything that I voted on in the last 8 years, I would never change any of those votes. I usually do a considerable amount of research before I make those votes, and I feel confident in every one of them.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, hot potato to you.
Perfect. I think you have to be able to look back on some of your decisions, and you have to sometimes admit mistakes. Right now, I would say just recently we dealt with the street diet over on 16th Street. I think looking back on that, if I had to vote on that again, I'd vote against it. I don't think we need to break something to fix it. And right now, to me, that stretch of street in the city of Minot is not broken. So if that came before the council again, I would vote it down.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And Shaun, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. Dating back to 2017, when I was an alderman, we went through the budget process and approved essentially a half a pay raise for the city employees at that time when we were struggling with turnover rate at about 18%, and that did not sit well with the city employees. And looking back, it was a mistake. I absolutely regretted making that vote for that item, and subsequently made up for it in future years in putting more assets towards the city employees so we could trim down that turnover rate and keep those employees on, keep their minds on where their jobs were most needed.
Okay, perfect. Let's take just a few seconds now. I want to do a quick PSA. So early voting, June 6th through the 10th, as well as the 13th. Early voting for the Minot Mayor and a number of other spots. So that can happen from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Ward County Administration Building. And then Election Day, just a reminder, that's June 14th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It is not at the auditorium this year. It is at the State Fair Center as well as the Mesa Arena. You can go to either one of those. Okay, so PSA is over. Let's get started with our next question. I think we're up to Tom now. Tom, this next question is simple. What is the future for the Minot landfill?
The future of the Minot landfill is, it's there. It's there for a while. It's there. We're looking at a life of 20 to 25 years. We have been looking for a new landfill site. It's been a struggle. It's that old, we don't want it in our backyard type of struggle. But you're also looking at, there's so many federal regulations that are involved with that. Eventually, it's going to have to be moved, but I don't see it in the near future.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, what's the future for the landfill?
For the next 20 years, the landfill is going to remain where it is at for the EPA reasons, for the land availability reasons, everything that was just stated. I look at this perhaps as the opportunity to open up the discussion at a state level, because this isn't just a Minot issue. This is a Bismarck, Fargo, Grand Forks, Dickinson, Williston issue as well. I think if we look at this holistically, we might be able to come up with a better solution as a lot of our landfills near the end of their life cycles down the road. So if we can work collectively together rather than the state health department funneling out dollars to help with those different landfills, maybe we can come up with a lot better solution rather than each one of us trying to find land within 6 to 8 miles that, one, you can buy at a reasonable price, two, is permittable, and then figure out what the life scale of it is at and just continue to repeat the process over.
Okay, thank you. Miranda, you get the last answer on this one. What's the future for the landfill?
The landfill is not moving. It's going to stay where it is for the same reasons the gentleman before me answered. I think back on my time in council, and I was the first alderman to actually take a tour of the landfill, which was kind of exciting. I took an interest in garbage at that time. The landfill is not moving, but one thing that I would look forward to is we've got 20 years in its current location. We need to start looking now at where we're going to place that. I think that we need some more long-term vision. There was probably some short-sightedness in placing where it is now because the community obviously is growing around it, and it's going to continue to grow around it. So those conversations and those thought processes on where we're going to be looking to expand that in the next 20 years probably should start happening in the next few years.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. It looks like we've got Shaun as the next one for this question, and this is a topic that just came up in the last 3 or 4 hours. But if all candidates could address it, please. What is your personal policy for accepting campaign contributions?
Mark,
Shaun,
I'm glad this policy or this question came up regarding the contributions. 2018 and for this campaign, I didn't go out and solicit any campaigns. However, I did or was offered one from a business. And as I stated in my Facebook post, you never stop learning. Found out today that under the campaign contribution statements outlined by state law that I printed out, that's not acceptable. So with that, I have actually already contacted the company in returning those. And typically in the last the last election cycle, I had just a handful of small contributions, and this one will go without any contributions.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, what is your policy or personal policy for accepting campaign contributions?
My first election in 2014, I ran on a $200 budget to be elected to city council. When I ran for school board, I sold t-shirts to raise personal funds and ran approximately a $400 campaign. the current campaign I have now, I have had people reach out to me and ask to give me dollars for my campaign. As to date, I have $425 raised, and I have turned down several of those contributions because I don't want someone to think that money will buy my vote in the future. And this is something that I want to do for myself and for my community. So I've told people I'm going to run a lean campaign, and I was told prior to announcing that I was going to need approximately $3,000 to run this, and I told them I wouldn't. Whether I'm successful or not, I don't know, but that would be my fiscal conservative nature, and I'm going to run this as lean as I can.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, you get the last one at this. What is your personal policy for accepting campaign contributions?
My personal policy was with my campaign here for mayor, I've had the opportunity to sit down with small businessmen and discuss the issues that are important to them. My failure, where I failed, was in improper filing of my campaign disclosure statement. I put business name instead of the individual, and that's the money I received. I consider it came from the individual and not the business. So they weren't buying votes, they weren't buying favors. They actually came to me and they offered. They said, "Tom, how can we help you? We want you in that mayor's seat. We need you in that mayor's seat. How can we help you?" And so whether it was Greg or Mary or Dean or Chuck, those are the people that are supporting my campaign, and that's how I see it.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you to all the candidates for handling these questions. We really appreciate your time here with us. We're 25 minutes in. We're scheduled for another hour or so. A reminder online, please keep the questions coming in. I've got a stack of only a dozen here, so we'll try to get to all of them. And for any of the folks who are here, if you want to continue to write any questions, we'll see how many we can get to. So thank you for that time. Next question goes, I think, first to Miranda. Miranda, this one kind of takes us back in the last couple years, dealing with masks or masking up. And the question is kind of a broad one. Are there any opinions on the Emergency Powers Act? That's the question as it comes in. Would you like to make any statement or any comment about masking up over the last couple of years?
Sure, I will. The last 4 years, I referenced earlier, I've been on the Minot Public School Board, and that's been a challenging position for the last 4 years, and specifically the last 2 years. I know it was referenced the emotional piece to serving in a public capacity. That has been probably the most emotionally taxing position that I've been in. I supported masking initially in the schools, and there was a specific reason. Personally, I did not wear them, but in schools I did because the objective was to keep the kids in the schools. And at that time, CDC and the First District Health Unit and the powers that be, so to speak, said that if both parties were wearing a mask at the time, then no one would have to quarantine if there was someone positive. The objective was to keep kids in school. At that time, I supported masks, and the reason I did is because it was important to keep our children in school. Once those rules changed, I was the first one to make a motion to remove the masking mandate. I absolutely, wholeheartedly support each person's individual choice. If they choose to wear a mask, that's great. If they choose not to, I also appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, next shot at this. Any opinions on that, on the masking up over the last couple of years?
Yeah, my opinion hasn't been quiet. It hasn't been in the back closet. I stand up, fully vaccinated. I've gotten COVID twice. So, there's flaws. There's flaws in the system. And I believe in the rights of the business owners. I believe that if I go into a business and they require it, I'm going to respect it because it's their business. I personally don't believe that the masks work. I stand by that. Not everybody agrees with me on that, but that's my own personal opinion, and I'll defend that. And that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, that's that same question.
Very good question, and most of it is tied to a lot of emotion for a lot of people. In 2020, when all of this came out with COVID, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we were learning as we went when it came to masking. Many discussions were had with mayors across North Dakota on a very regular basis, almost 2 to 3 conversations a week when it came to this. And the information that we were receiving from our health officials was that it would be best to go that route. When it came to the executive decision, it ended up being a full council decision and not a single person's decision, meaning the mayor. So it was voted on by council. We're lucky that COVID ended up being only what it was, and I don't mean to diminish anyone who lost anyone from COVID, but I truly hope we don't take public health backwards because of the emotions that are tied to this. And I will say that the only executive action that I did take, when I pulled the mask mandate, I was also took that one pretty hard as well from folks.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. I think next now we're going to go to Tom for this next question. Tom, all candidates, maybe we answer this one in 30 seconds or less. I think this one's a pretty direct one, has a shorter answer. As a taxpayer, why do we have to pay at the landfill when I bring my own garbage? And I'll add the question, would you change this? Tom, why do we have to pay, and would you consider changing this?
Well, I think the way I interpret that question mark is, we have the garbage pickup, we have the container pickup. That's where your pay comes from. Taking garbage or trash above and beyond that is above and beyond what the city would pick up. So I still believe that there needs to be a fee for that.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun?
Thank you, Mark. Very similar. When we did some analysis dating back to 2017-18, when it came to city services, and it's who's using those services and paying for those services. And to the point that garbage pickup is done biweekly. We have 2 free pickups at the curb annually. And when excess is taken out there, it's either paid by the individual or spread across the whole. So it came back to, again, basically paying for what services you're using. So I would be in favor of keeping things the way they are.
Okay, and Miranda, finish us off on this one.
As I referenced earlier, I like talking about garbage. I was on the ad hoc council the committee that actually led to automated services and the containers that we have now. And I think we have a really good plan that's working with 3 different sizes, people being able to choose what size fits their personal needs in their household. We do have the 2 collection times each year where you can literally throw anything out, as well as the collection times when you can dispose of your hazardous materials. I don't think there's anything wrong with paying a few dollars if you have some additional things to dispose of. And the problem that we ran into, and I can reference back to this, is what was happening is contractors would come and do work, and then they would leave the materials for the homeowner to take out to dump for free. And that's an abuse of the system.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. I think we're next up with Shaun. Shaun, this question is, what is your vision for making Minot a community that is healthy for those living in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction? What is your vision for making Minot a community that is healthy for those living in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction?
Thank you, Mark. I think the answer to this, again, is not just a city issue, but a state issue. As a matter of fact, on June 1st, there is an opioid roundtable discussion that's taking place at the North Central Research Center from all of the law enforcement that I'm participating in. The vision for the future is trying to work with mental health services and bringing that from the state level more closely into the local level where it can be treated. Because I think, as we saw with the mayor's Committee on Addiction, that simple imprisonment and confinement isn't the answer to solving the problem. So it's got to be an issue that is holistic and not just community by community, because what happens then is you have the metro areas that bear the burden. The local taxpayers bear the burden for the cost of the entire region. So if we don't take a look at it at a holistic level, we're never going to solve it locally.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, same question.
This is an important topic. This is actually a personal topic for me. I'll preface this back. When I decided to run for mayor, my mother and my brother are both recovering addicts, and they both live in town, and they were worried they'd have to leave in order for me to run for this position. There's a lot of great services in this community for addiction, and for people that say that it is not here, they're absolutely, completely incorrect. But this isn't something that the local government needs to tackle on its own. We have some amazing community partners. Scott is here from Independence Inc., and he's got a great program through Free Through Recovery. We've got programs with Marco. We work with North Central Human Services. we need to continue to have these discussions and normalize these discussions and help people who are living with addiction and family members living with addiction to know that there are resources available to them so those people can come out of that cycle and become functioning and productive citizens.
Okay, thank you. Tom, same question then. What's your vision for making Minot a community that is healthy for those living in recovery from drug and alcohol addictions?
Yeah. It's not a problem that one set of eyes is going to solve. It's a problem we need everybody in the community involved in it, whether it's law enforcement, healthcare, mental health services, social services. We all need to come together to find it. I also believe we need to put a focus on cutting it off at the source, stopping the source from coming into the community. That's one step in the right direction. We have had grants in the past for addiction services. I'm not sure if they were ever fulfilled or the projects were carried through to the end. That's a little bit of a concern for me. But once again, if you bring the community together, you take the blinders off, and you look at a citywide, community-wide, region-wide, statewide, there's got to be a way that we can solve this problem.
Okay, thank you. This question will move to Miranda first. So Miranda, what steps would you take to make certain that the last-minute contract with a city official, such as the past city administrator, does not happen again? What steps would you take to make sure that a last-minute contract with a city official does not happen again?
If I'm remembering correctly, you're probably referencing there was an ad to an upcoming city council meeting. I think it came through late on a Friday. Things have to be posted with certain given notice. That shouldn't happen. That probably should have been tabled for another meeting. Had it come to me, I would have said we need to have some more transparency around this specific topic, and we need to look at either having it at a different meeting, or honestly, it needed its own meeting time. So in that specific instance, that was the wrong time for that to be added.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, same question. What steps would you take to make certain that a last-minute contract with a city official, such as a past city administrator, does not happen again?
Absolutely. That was hands down poor judgment. That was hands down the decision of somebody who has not been in a leadership position. Perception is reality. You sneak it in at the last minute, there's going to be questions. You sneak it in 9 months before the deadline to negotiate, that's going to bring questions. You sneak it in when there's even rumblings of some improprieties happening within the city government, within management of the city. All of those are issues that are absolute red flags, and history, I promise you, when I'm the mayor, history will not repeat itself in a situation like that.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, you get to finish us off. What steps would you take to make sure the last-minute contract with a city official does not happen again?
Thank you, Mark. These are some of the processes that we talk about internal. So coming into the position of mayor, there were and are a ton of unwritten processes that have just never been outlined. Going through the renegotiation of the city manager there's no book on here's what you need to do. So going through all of that and learning from the missteps and taking that back to council and completely redesigning how this process works now with the city attorney and now with legal advice. The one thing I will say is the process is much more defined, very well outlined now, with a tremendous amount of open and transparent process. What I do find interesting, though, is that the current city manager contract mirrors very closely to the previous city manager contract.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Let's move to the next question now. I believe, Tom, you are first on this one. The individual states in their question, as Minot has the highest mill levy in the state, what specific steps will you take to address this?
Well, once again, it goes back to, I believe, we've got to project our budgets. I think there's opportunity to improve projecting our budgets more accurately. We also have to, I lost my train of thought there, Mark, but we have to project our budgets more accurately. We have to keep an eye on spending. Now, property taxes for our budget, we've got 25 million, 26 million out of a $276 million budget. It's a smaller portion of that. I'm not taking it lightly, but it's a smaller portion of that. So we have to look at other opportunities. Where can we find funding? Can we find funding on a federal level? Can we find funding on a state level? How creative can we be to where we can keep the level of funding going while keeping the portion that is brought on by property taxes as level as we possibly can and still continue with the services that the residents deserve and expect.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, what can be done? What specific steps would you take to address our mill levy?
So, Mark, we do have one of the highest mill levy rates in the entire state. With the recent different presentation by the finance director, we need to take a look at what the total taxation is within the community compared to other cities around North Dakota. And if you add in what other communities do for special assessments and put that into their total tax bill, we're right in the even mark with a lot of other communities around North Dakota. So I think the question we have to ask is, what are we paying for with that? And if we want to lower the tax mill levy rate, what are we either going to sacrifice in terms of service, or are we going to the special assessment scenario that Fargo and Bismarck and many other communities utilize? So it just comes down to what services the public is asking for and demands, and how are we going to pay for it? So is it through the mill levy, or is it through special assessment?
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, you get to finish us up. What specific steps would you take to address Minot's high mill levy?
First things first, I probably would want to fact check. I think you said it's the highest mill levy. I'm not sure if that is true.
I only read it off the piece of paper, but yes, I didn't fact check it either.
I don't know that that's true. Again, being my critical thinking mind, I would want to check that first. But it's helping to educate people also as well that when you get that property tax bill, in fact, I was having a discussion with someone about this today, understanding that you have separate political subdivisions that are that are on that bill. Things like your school board, your park board, your county, and your city. Everybody assumes that the mayor is in charge of all of those things, which is not entirely true. Understanding that those mills come from each of those different political entities and that every citizen needs to be involved and understand the differences in those would be key to helping them understand the value that they're getting for their existing mills. And I think I'm out of time.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you, Miranda. This next question, we'll start with Shaun. So Shaun, the individual asks, what have you done, and the you would be for anybody, right? What have you done to actively support small businesses and small business owners in town?
What have I specifically done? As part of the council, I've specifically been engaged with the facade improvement program that is enabling some of the businesses downtown to reshape their storefronts. That is substantial help. Working through the IEDC white paper process, we have to dial back to 2016-17 timeframe. There were a lot of different programs that were lurched forward in helping educate some of the small businesses develop business plans. And then being part of the Chamber EDC, while, yes, the former, different former MADC was built around, the core principle businesses, I think that there has been a significant effort to also engage on the holistic economic development. Part of that is through the city's programs when we hired an economic development individual to help streamline small businesses through individual processes when they come in for permits, when they go through the process that they may not understand. So as the city's portion of that, we've helped engage and improve their process.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, what have you done to actively support small businesses and small business owners in town?
I am a small business owner, and I would like to see government get out of the way of small businesses. Business knows what business needs, and business does what business needs to do. The government shouldn't be involved in those things. I'd like to see a more collaborative effort between some of our departments when new businesses want to come into town and they want to develop here. I do believe in economic tools that we have within the city, but personally, to continue to support, get out of their way. Let them do what they need to do. Because as a business owner myself, I can look at my numbers and I know what I need to do. And any other business owner that's looking to come or open a business in Minot or have a business here, they know what they need. Get out of their way.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. And Tom, finish us off on this. What have you done to actively support small businesses and small business owners in town?
Well, I got to thank the mayor for, when I first got on council, he assigned me to the Zoning Ordinance Steering Committee. That was it's a committee that was rewriting zoning ordinances for the city of Minot. My first meeting, I'll never forget, is sitting down in this room with the committee. I talked about how we need to make Minot more business friendly. We need to make it easier for businesses to do business in Minot, whether that's streamlining the paper trail, whether it's working together with all the departments. I think that committee itself has done gangbusters in making it easier to do business with the city. The second thing is sitting down, talking, asking questions of small businesses, and just shutting up and listen. To me, that's a powerful tool, and being responsive to small business. When a small business person calls me, it's almost immediate when I'm able to get back to them.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Next question coming up. Miranda, you get the first shot at this. The individual asks, is there a potential for a public transportation system that runs all day long and during the weekends?
Well, there is a busing system in the city of Minot. I know that there have been some revisions to some of the routes that they're offering, but I don't know that I can answer that question given that I don't currently have the information. So I guess I don't have an answer for that one.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, is there potential for a public transportation system that runs all day long and during the weekends?
Well, the question asks about potential. There's always potential. But part of that potential, we have to look at costs. We have to look at if it's justified. Right now in Minot, I don't know if a full-day busing program is justifiable. And if it's justifiable, how do we pay for it? Those are always, that's the juggling act that we do as city council members, is we get projects like this and we have to figure out first of all, if it's justified, how do we pay for it? And if there are no federal or state dollars to do it, are we willing to put something like that on the backs of the property tax owners? So, I'll take a side to it, but I'm also going into a project with open eyes, and I can be convinced either way.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And Shaun, finish us off on this question.
Here lies the challenge. One of the previous questions was how do we reduce the mill levy rate or address that? And with this question, can we do more with what we currently have? I think one of the questions when it comes to busing that really also needs to be addressed with this is we don't have a school busing program that also could help lend an answer to this. If we don't have school buses that are designated for just school-age children, we are currently under the system relying on public transportation through the city of Minot to supplement that. Is there a possibility that if we were to have a school busing program that we could extend the actual municipal busing throughout the city on weekends or evenings? Those numbers could be looked at. But under the current paradigm with the funding that we have in place, without going after more funding, the answer is no. But not to say that there couldn't be find a way to get to the answer of yes, but it would have to mean substantial changes in other areas.
Okay, thank you. Let's start back over at Tom with this question. Tom, the question comes in for any of the candidates, obviously. Do any of you have plans to install more sidewalks or multi-use trails throughout existing residential areas? Obviously, the trail side maybe fits more under Park District, but the sidewalk obviously fits under City of Minot. Do you have any plans to install more sidewalks or multi-use trails throughout existing residential areas?
Well, I believe our staff right now is searching through and working with, I believe it's NDOT with or NDDOT on safe sidewalks projects. And I think we currently have one in the process or one completed, and we're working with others. So I believe that every neighborhood in town needs to have sidewalks. To me, it's just, it's puzzling why we don't have sidewalks. But once again, it also goes back to the different subdivision developments and how they were put in and how they were developed. There's a process now after they've been developed to go through to find the funding to put the sidewalks in. And our team here at the City of Minot, they're working on that.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, any plans to install more sidewalks or multi-use trails?
So if we take a look at the Safe Route to Schools program that we are working through with grant funding, there are more sidewalks planned as we get funding specifically to get children from residential areas to schools. So the answer absolutely is yes. How we got here was the inconsistency from former councils during periods of development in the 70s and 80s and even in the early 90s that they didn't have to put sidewalks in until adjoining property was developed. Well, we see how that turned out. The council of the last 20 years has been a lot more consistent. When we talk about other areas, it would absolutely take a full council and a significant effort by the community to address this holistically. Now, when we talk about walking paths, it is being integrated into flood control. We will have a walking path in joint effort with the Parks Department from one end of our city to the other through the floodway project, connecting all of the downtown city parks and everywhere in between with flood control. So that is all being tied together. So with that project, absolutely, there's a significant amount that will be added.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, you get to finish us on this one.
It goes back, like the gentleman before me were saying, the short-sightedness of planning in the 70s and 80s where there were developments where there are no sidewalks. Now we're going back and trying to find ways to have those sidewalks installed. But on top of that, we need to be doing more to be ADA compliant, because a lot of the people that are utilizing sidewalks, other than them that use it for recreational purposes, it's going to be a lot of those lower to moderate type income people, persons that have disabilities. We need to be focusing more on making sure that we've got some ADA compliance and we've got safe routes for all people to travel throughout the city. I do believe engineering is looking at doing an additional study in 2024, but right now, currently budgeted, it's the bare minimum, specifically on that ADA accessibility on those sidewalks. So we do need to look at those things. That falls back into that critical infrastructure piece that I'm so focused on.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Let's go with our next question. I think, Shaun, you get to start us off on this one. Workforce challenges seem to be present for all businesses, including government entities. What can be done to ensure that the good employees, both full-time and seasonal, are recruited and retained by the City of Minot? What can be done to ensure that good employees are recruited and retained by the City of Minot?
Are we talking to the City of Minot or for the community itself?
For the city employees.
For the City of Minot. So that is, again, putting resources into the assets which basically make up the majority of our budget. And that is within the different pay scales and different benefits that are available. Now, when we talk about recruiting good people to the City of Minot, one thing that I think our police department, our fire department over the last number of years has done a great job, and we can continue to put effort on, is focusing on our great friends north at Minot Air Force Base. As some of them separate from Minot Air Force Base, we do have a workforce and a number of those people that stay within our community. And I think if we really take a hard effort and focus on some of our folks, Minot Air Force Base, we can capture some of that. Part of that is also taking a look at where we might be able to partner perhaps with CTE program that's going to be launching in Minot in the 120 building on Burdick Expressway, and seeing if we can get some of those technically trained people that might be able to work into our own confines within the city. Now, as far as our police department itself, that is a national struggle, and I think we need to message stronger to the entire state and region that we support our police officers and we can fill those positions.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, what can be done to ensure that good employees are recruited and retained by the City of Minot?
Attracting and retaining employees is challenging in all aspects, not just for the city, but for for private business as well. It's a struggle that's happening across the country, and we are fortunate to live where we live. We've seen an influx of people moving to North Dakota and to our area because of maybe an easier life, a slower life, less restrictions. And what we need to do is we need to continue to foster the relationships with the employees that we bring in, continue to enhance the training that we have for those employees, continue to offer lateral movements within the community and support them in their positions, and then rely on them to help bring in additional friends and relatives. I know that's happening in the police department. Police officers who have moved here to work in this department are looking to bring in additional friends that they served with in different departments. So I think we need to rely on our existing talent to help us bring in that talent.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. And Tom, finish us off on this one.
I think employees that are going to stay are employees that feel like they're engaged in what they do, and that they're engaged from the bottom all the way to the top, to where they feel like they have a voice and they can be heard, not only by the department heads, but by the city council and even by the mayor's office. You got to be approachable. They've got to be a part of the solution. And we have a lot of good employees out there, and they have a lot of good ideas. We've got to empower them to help us find areas to recruit, where to find those areas to recruit, and to help us sell. You know, every single employee of the city of Minot is a salesperson for the city of Minot, and they have that opportunity to help create a culture within the city of Minot, to where they can spread the word, where people coming in can feel a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. Not just a mill levy, but they're a part of finding a solution to save mill levies. And to me, that's the main training and engagement.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Next question here goes to Miranda. First off, Miranda, what are your plans for Southwest Minot as Trinity Health moves out there to ensure quality of life for residents of this area?
First things first, we need some road work out there. 31st Avenue, I think, could use some attention. We've got to work with our planning department to make sure we've got good long-term planning for strong development in that area, whether we're doing commercial development or residential, and pairing those so that we have a good long-term focus on what that area is going to look like, because I think that there's going to be continued growth out there. We're going to need some trees and some fencing probably to help with the problems for the garbage that's flying out of the landfill. But from my understanding, I think we're about ready to move into a new cell, so hopefully we'll see that problem somewhat rectify itself when we move into that new cell. But again, it's going to fall back on long-term planning and infrastructure.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, what are your plans for Southwest Minot as Trinity Health moves out there to ensure quality of life for residents of this area?
This goes back to, part of it goes back to being on the zoning ordinance steering committee, and it's got to be calculated, it's got to be thoughtful planning for that area. There are projects that are in the works that are going to be interesting to see once they get in front of the council for quality of life out there. I think also engaging our partners, whether it's Parks and Rec or whoever, to work together to find some opportunities out there to where we can keep drawing further development out in that neck of the woods.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And Shaun, finish us off on this one.
One of the big projects out there that's kind of looming is actually the Puppy Dog Coulee drainage system that basically runs from the Southwest Minot right underneath Dakota Square Mall. And it is undersized and absolutely has to be replaced. So I know our teams within Public Works are working hard on finding a solution for that. It's a costly solution, so it's going to likely require some state help on that. When we talk about the design, Epic has talked about the tracks out there. We're talking about a lot of different residential possibilities, but absolutely working with our partners. With the park specifically, I think when the 2011 hit, parks absolutely made the realization that we have a lot in the valley and not enough on the hills. They've made that commitment to Northwest Minot, but even Ron Merritt and his great folks have already recognized that, and those conversations are ongoing. So I think it's a kind of the collection of all of it, and absolutely getting some fencing farther away from that landfill so that we don't have to enlist volunteers to go out and pick plastic when the wind's blowing 70 miles per hour. So there is some work to do there as well.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. We'll take a 5-second little break and do another PSA again. Another reminder, early voting starts June 6th through the 10th, and on the 13th as well. It's at the Ward County Administration Building from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. for early voting within the city. Election day is June 14th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the State Fair Center and at the Mesa Arena. Again, not at the auditorium this year. 7 to 7 on June 14th at the State Fair Center and the Mesa Arena. Tom, I think you're next up for this question. It's kind of a two-part question, so we'll get them both in at the same time. How will you approach the conversation with the community about the desire to keep property taxes and other fees as low as possible, especially during tough times of high inflation? Are you okay with property tax increases in upcoming budgets to handle inflation?
I am not in favor of investing or increasing property taxes. The increase in property taxes has to show an effective outcome. It has to provide some deliverables for me to vote for an increase in property taxes. We go through this budget process, and we spent several hours over the last few weeks touring all the departments and listening to budget presentations. They have to, in my opinion, they have to defend an increase in their budget by what we get out of it as taxpayers. And I also believe in empowering those employees in finding ways to cut property taxes or finding ways to save money and reward them for doing so. We're all in this together. Will there be property tax increases? Eventually. But I'm not looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you. Shaun, same question. How will you approach the conversation with the community about the desire to keep property taxes and other fees as low as possible, especially during tough times of high inflation? Are you okay with property tax increases in upcoming budgets to handle inflation?
Well, I think education is probably the key on the upcoming budget, because property owners will see a property tax increase that the voters actually approved on for the last school bond. So when we focus solely on the city of Minot, this is a point I made in 2018. If we want to continue to be able to do more with what we have to grow the base. That means economic development within the community, smart development, so we're not growing outwards, doing the expansion type of growth, and doing infill. Now that's long-term solution to adding to the base. I think we're going to do our dangdest to hold the line this upcoming budget, or at least I will. The challenge is trying to predict what sales tax revenues are going to do and how we can supplement some of that. And there's also hub city funding that we'll be able to capitalize on this budget, maybe next, that those revenues are coming up a little bit higher. But with the asks that are coming forward, the answer does come back to what the community wants and what they're willing to pay for.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, same question. I'll ask the whole thing again. How will you approach the conversation with the community about the desire to keep property taxes and other fees as low as possible, especially during tough times of high inflation? Are you okay with property tax increases in upcoming budgets to handle inflation?
I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that things are going to get less expensive, because every single one of us in our household budgets is seeing an increase in the amount of money that we're having to spend as a result of inflation. City government is no different than that. So the only way to reduce that would be either to grow the tax base, cut the services, or find another avenue. And I heard an interesting topic stated, and former Representative Roscoe Striley, who's running again for District 3, has a great idea to go to the state potentially and look at reducing property taxes by 50% using part of the projected $2 billion surplus that the state's going to have. That's a really interesting plan that I would like to look a little bit more into. From a city, we don't have the ability to change the way that the state allocates their monies, But working with that legislative group in Bismarck, that might be a real solution to some of these issues.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. This question is a how would you respond question. So we'll start with the mayor. How would you respond if someone said to you that we push too many tax dollars to downtown refurbishment and instead we should spread it out for road improvements and recycling? How would you respond to that?
Well, I think I would respond by taking a look at where those tax dollars are coming from. If those dollars are specifically designated by the actual voters for economic development or redevelopment, those dollars could not be pushed from, whether it be the Magic Fund dollars or the economic development portion of that sales tax penny, that proportion, by the voters themselves said it has to be used for that. Now, if we take a look at the other infrastructure that was spent downtown, the vast overwhelming majority of that came in through HUD, CDBG grants. So when we take a look at what money is being spent, it's important to understand what money was designated by the voters themselves for what it could be used for. Now, there is a significant amount of other investment that is going for other infrastructure around the community that we're able to capitalize through Hub City funding that the state itself designated has to be used for infrastructure, and that is holistically. It's about $500,000 per month right now.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, same question. How would you respond if someone said to you that we push too many tax dollars for downtown refurbishment and we should spread it out to road improvements and recycling instead?
Those are very different topics. 3 of them are very different topics, and they need to be approached differently. When you talk about downtown, I personally want to see a vibrant downtown for many different reasons. Downtown generates a considerable amount of sales tax dollars that benefit our community, but in addition to that, the downtown businesses pay a large amount of property tax dollars as well. And when you look at the amount of property tax money that comes into the city, just strictly from a block downtown, it's pretty considerable. So we need to look at all of those things differently. I have a focus on streets. I do want to get into streets. I did chair the recycling ad hoc committee, and I do have a passion for recycling as well. Each one of those 3 topics has a place in our community, but I don't know that they're necessarily or should necessarily be tied together. One shouldn't be negated for another one.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, same question. How would you respond if someone said to you that we push too many tax dollars to downtown for refurbishment and instead we should spread it out for road improvements and recycling?
Yeah, I feel, downtown is thriving, but we can't take our foot off the gas. Downtown has the potential of being an incredible economic driver. Now with the M building going up and moving forward, I think we're going to see with City Hall moving downtown, there's going to be an incredible energy downtown. I've never been, it's never sat well with me that so much of a focus of dollars goes to downtown when we've got North Hill, we've got South Hill, we've got East Burdick, we've got West Burdick Expressway, they're all small business owners that still should all have the opportunity to take advantage of whatever funding there is out there. Moving funding from economic development to roads and recycling, if they, like I said at the beginning, if the city, if we're not going to be aggressive and use the tax dollars for economic development, let's give it back. And, maybe one way of giving it back is working on the streets.
Okay, thank you, Tom. This next question, it's kind of 2 questions combined together. Someone had asked, this will go to Miranda first. Someone had asked, what could the city do better from this past April blizzard in their response? And so, then really the broader question is, how can the city handle snow removal and snow emergencies more effectively and efficiently?
I think they did a pretty good job. I actually was quite impressed. I think back on, it was the snowstorm in, multiple snowstorms in 2017 when we had to redo our entire snow removal process for the city of Minot. And I think that the response in April was pretty outstanding. I know that the Public Works Department has gone to a lease program to help with offsetting some of the breakdown costs of their equipment. I think that's been beneficial to them. And overall, personally, I'm pretty pleased with the outcome of that storm.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, what are your thoughts? What could the city have done better with the April blizzard, but in general, handling snow removal and snow emergencies more effectively and efficiently?
You know, we have to realize that this was historic proportions. You know, snow gates don't work with 36 to 48 inches of snow. They just don't, and they're not effective. But one thing that I think city employees did in this blizzard, they managed expectations, they educated, and they did a good job. They worked their tails off to clear the streets. I work at a senior living facility, and we had to send a resident to the hospital, and city staff were there. They had the street cleared for the fire department, for the ambulance. I think they did a bang-up job, and we learn with each blizzard. We learn. We did a great job. We had contractors come in to help clear the streets, but we really did a good job of managing expectations and educating the public on the whole process and what it takes to clear a historic snow event.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun?
4 feet of snow in late April. Yeah, tell me too many communities that can be able to dig out in the time that we did. I'm going to echo the congratulations to the city staff. The folks that worked around the clock that we had staying in hotels near Public Works, there was significant sacrifice. My guess is some of this question is probably relating to downtown, that snow was piled down there because it was late April, and we figured it's going to warm up and we're going to see some melting. If we're going to see some improvement, I think with snow removal downtown specifically, I think that we're probably having that discussion with all of the businesses down there if they want to cost share with some of the snow removal, in the essence where if there is a significant cost to that, like there would have been to the tune of $100,000 to move that snow out in late April, I think that's a reasonable request for that conversation from all of those businesses. But in terms of adding a bunch of equipment and people in the case of a worst ever blizzard, again, it comes back to responsible budgeting, but our crews did a fantastic job.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. I want to put out a quick reminder. We're about 15, 20 minutes away from wrapping up tonight. We've got a few more questions in the queue and a couple of our own. So this is kind of a last call for any questions. If anyone's got anything online or here in person, make sure you get those questions in now. So it looks like we are back up to Tom on this one. And this could be a 30-second answer if you guys want to. It depends on your opinion, maybe. The question came in, should the city of Minot require term limits on council members? And I would add, or the mayor. Should the city of Minot require term limits of council members or the mayor?
Yes.
Okay, anything else to add, Tom? No?
I think it's a responsibility of the person to, you hear the argument, well, term limits are the vote. Term limits are the election. Let the people be the term limits. But I think a person can be honorable and say, you know what, I'm only going to serve 2 terms, and I'm going to work actively to find somebody who's going to replace me. I'm going to speak, I'm going to recruit and bring somebody in. But I think the honorable thing for any candidate to do is say, you know what, I'm not going to sit here, I'm not going to be a career politician. I'm not going to sit at this dais for years and years and years. I want somebody else. I want another set of eyes to be here. And I'm one for that. So I am all in favor of term limits.
Okay, thank you. Shaun?
I think this would be a question that would be best answered by the people themselves. I'm announced for my second and final term. I will say that there is more time and effort put into this position than I think most people realize. There is a tremendous amount of work that goes into the mayor position, and if it doesn't, it's not being done right. In terms of, let's take a look at the council race right now. We have 4 people running for 3 seats. 3 of those are incumbents. It's also important that the community understand that we need people to step forward to run for those positions if they're going to choose term limits. That's increasingly difficult. So that question also has to have an answer. Are we going to have people that are going to step forward? But I do believe if that's the case, that should be a question answered by the voters.
By the voters. Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, finish us off on this one.
Term limits do exist because at any given time, when a person is up for re-election, the community can choose to not elect that person. But I don't know that I can support term limits specifically for the city of Minot for a couple of reasons. We have an issue with people deciding to run. This isn't easy. Serving in a public position is not an easy thing to do. It takes a special kind of person, a person who's interested in this type of thing and has a desire to serve their community in that way. we don't have a lot of people stepping up to fill these spots. Like Shaun had alluded to, we have 4 people vying for 3 seats on council. We have 3 people vying for 2 seats on the school board. All of these are incredibly important. So if you say, hey, we're going to limit terms, I am afraid that we may end up with seats that don't even have anybody to run for them. I'd like to see a more engaged younger community. I'd like to see a more engaged just general population. And I'd like to see more people step up to serve in these positions. So that's where I stand on term limits.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. I believe, Shaun, you are next on this one. It's kind of a 3-part question, but they're all really short. So what is your vision of Minot in 8 to 10 years? What do we look like? What are we known for? Look out 8 to 10 years.
Vision out 8 to 10 years, the city of Minot, if we take a look at the growth that is going to take place in Northwest Minot because of a new high school, I see a tremendous amount of growth in Northwest Minot. Southwest Minot will continue to grow around our new Trinity complex, which is phenomenal. We will have to find a repurposement for the space where Trinity is vacating downtown, but more importantly, just at the end of that time frame, we're going to be welcoming in GBSD, ground-based strategic deterrence. That is the replacement of all 150 missile silos that is just going to be kicking off. We will need more restaurants and service industries to be able to meet the needs of those 4,000 contractors that will be coming in. But I think we will be stronger partnered with the DOD. We will be stronger economically with even more quality of life factors that make us a better Magic City.
Okay. Miranda, where are we in 8 to 10 years? What are we known for? What do we look like?
I'd like to see a very vibrant and active downtown in 8 to 10 years, more so than it is now, and encompassing more space. Robust arts community, because I think that's important for the overall health and happiness of our community. An impactful nonprofit sector that collaborates with the city on a lot of different aspects, and a more involved citizen-based and dynamic economy. The addition of the new high school and the transition there, in addition to the hospital, as Shaun alluded to, those are huge things for our community, and that's going to allow us to grow tremendously. I look back, too, at the last time the country went through a recession and how people came to our area to find additional jobs or find work and economic stability for their family, and I really hope that in 8 to 10 years we see kind of a resurgence of that again.
Okay. And Tom, would you finish us off on that? What's your vision of Minot in 8 to 10 years? What are we known for? What do we look like?
8 to 10 years from now, we're going to see, as the mayor alluded to, we're going to see incredible energy and development in the northwest and southwest portions of town. We're going to see an incredible energy in downtown Minot. We're going to have a challenge with the vacated Trinity Hospital property, but there's going to be an energy to create something special down there. We're also going to be a destination for sports and sport tournaments, sports tourism. We're on the cusp of that right now, and you get a few years of building some of these tournaments and some of these events. You see the groundbreaking happening up at South Hill Complex. We're turning some of these projects and some of these facilities into world-class facilities, and we're going to take advantage of that. And in 8 to 10 years, people are going to look back and they're going to see an energy and an aura in Minot that they haven't seen forever.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. We have about 10 or 12 minutes left. I want to thank all of our candidates again. We've got 2 or 3 more questions I'd like to get in and maybe give you time for a closing statement. So by my count, looks like we're coming up next with Miranda. Miranda, you start with this one. Would you support increasing our tax base by supporting the relocation of refugees into our community? If yes, why? If no, why?
I'm all for diversity, and I think I'd have to give it a little more thought and look at the dynamics of it. My understanding is when you become a community that welcomes and maybe lobbies to have refugees put into your community, there is some federal tax dollars that come with that. So I don't know that I could make an educated answer on that without knowing a little more information first.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, same question. Would you support increasing our tax base or our population base by supporting the relocation of refugees into our community?
And as someone who is constantly looking for employees, I see the attraction of having that opportunity of an additional employee base come to the city of Minot. Right now, between retail and small business, I mean, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, employees are popping, going back and forth. So that's a concern. It has to be, for me to be involved in it or for me to support it, it has to be a well-thought-out program, and it has to be calculated. It just can't be, drop them here. We have to have the pieces in place to take care of them once they're here, get them into a position where they're earning a living wage to where they can survive in Minot, North Dakota.
Okay, thank you. Shaun, finish us off on this one.
There is a business in North Dakota that goes out and handpicks skilled and trained labor out of different refugee areas, specific to its business need. I think they have the winning model is if we are looking at actually bringing people in to fill some of these jobs, is we do it intelligently. And we also focus on some of the areas, if in fact that this would be the case, where, let's be honest, North Dakota's climate isn't going to throw them into a shock. What we don't have is a social welfare program to just mass relocate. So we would be kidding ourselves if we think that we're just going to bring in bus loads and drop them in Minot to solve the problem. But if we look at some of the models out there that are working, even for a company here in North Dakota, I think it would be possible to go out and find some of the skilled and trade folks and their families and bring them here. But we have to be kind of tactical about it.
Okay, thank you. I've got two more questions here, and then we will do your wrap-up statements. I think we're next coming up with Tom. Tom, if you were mayor, what would you do specifically to improve partnerships with other government entities in our community? So that's Ward County, Minot Public Schools, and the Minot Park District. If you were mayor, what would you do to improve those partnerships with those government entities?
Well, I mean, the obvious statement would be sitting down and meeting with them. I know we have the liaison committee, but it's also, it's making an effort and being the leader of a council that is going to bring the entities together. Now, we just don't need a liaison. For the first time this last year, this last month, we had a joint meeting of Ward County and the city of Minot. We can do that with Park District. We can do that with the school board. And by bringing these groups together to have an open discussion, I mean, once again, I keep saying this, but you have more eyes looking at problems, and it goes both ways. They can help solve something that we may be dealing with on the city council, but we can help them solve something that they may be dealing with Parks and Rec by bringing everybody together and creating that, being that catalyst in the office of the mayor to bring everybody together and work on projects together.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, what would you do to improve those partnerships with other government entities in our community?
Thank you, Mark. So for over the last 4 years, I've spent a significant amount of time meeting with our parks and school board folks, trying to meet with some of our county commissioners. But one of the more, I think perspective efforts that has been undertaken now, and it's been fairly successful over the last about year. We've had kind of the coalition team meeting once a month. This is members from each group coming together and talking about what's going on and trying to identify some of the challenges that we can collectively work together. I think what the question is how can we work better with Ward County? Let's just kind of tear it off there. Right now, there's some philosophical differences from some of those commissioners, and it is absolutely difficult to overcome some of those. Not to say that it can't be done, but I think that is going to take a tremendous effort, and it's also going to have to be an effort by the constituency here of Minot to help some of them understand that the city of Minot is inside Ward County, and that we were going to work better if we work together.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, finish us off. If you were mayor, what would you do to improve partnerships with other government entities in our community?
So 4 years ago when I decided to run for school board, that was part of my objective, is I wanted to learn how one of the other major political subdivisions worked, because if I wanted to continue to serve in a public manner, I wanted to have a better understanding of how each of these worked. And I think I have a interesting viewpoint serving on both of those, and having previously been on the liaison committee for the school board and for the city. The challenge is a lot of times there's not a lot of communication that goes on between those different entities. And as Shaun alluded to, I think the problem right now, as we're seeing in the news, is the county commission has been challenging to deal with on a few different things. And that, like he said, comes back down to the constituents, for them to let those elected officials know how you feel, and let each of the different entities continue to try to work together.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Second to last question. I really appreciate whoever got this one in for us. I like this question a lot. It's an easy one, but it kind of gets to a good result. So, Shaun, you'll start us off on this one. What are you most proud of in our city?
What am I most proud of within our city? And I think that is the collective spirit that makes us the Magic City. Now, that's a generic answer. Let's go back to the last snowstorm, the blizzard. We saw the community come together the way that we saw the community come together in 2011. We saw a lot of neighbors helping each other out, and I think that that's still, we're a bigger community, but we're still, I think in many ways, on that small community mindset. We see that in the downtown. If you go down there on a Friday night, it is a different downtown than it was even 5-6 years ago. It has come a long way. If you go into the mall, Dakota Square Mall, there's expansion. There is a lot of optimism right now within the Magic City, because I think the energy is kind of driving itself right now. Whether you look at North Hill or South Hill, there's a tremendous amount of positivity, and I think that, again, it's the people of who we are that makes the magic.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. Miranda, what are you most proud of in our city?
That's a hard question. I'd like to say that I'm most proud to be from this area. I'm most proud to showcase the opportunities that we have, the museums, the restaurants, the retail, the parks, all of these things. But that's not something the city government is necessarily responsible for. So looking back at what I would be most proud of as a community leader would come back down to the work that our employees do, the staff involvement and dedication to our community. They are really the magic. They make everything happen for our community, and I think they deserve all the credit.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, finish us off on this one. What are you most proud of in our city?
You know, like everybody in this room and everybody watching online, if you live in Minot, you've had the opportunity to leave. You've had the opportunity to live someplace else. I did for a couple years. But when it was time to raise a family and to raise 3 beautiful kids, there is no other place in this world that I would rather be than in Minot, North Dakota. And that's because of our schools. That's because of our churches, because of the education. It's because of the energy, the economic development, the recreation we have in this community is second to none. I'm very proud of that. I'm really proud of the future of Minot when I look at our youth. The youth that we have coming through the school system right now are the true leaders that are going to bring Minot to a place we've never imagined.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I want to thank all the candidates tonight. We're going to give them just a minute for a closing statement. Tom, Shaun, and Miranda, you've been good sports. We've covered nearly 30 questions, a wide variety of subjects. I want to thank all those who have participated tonight online, those who are here joining us in person. So we've got one round of closing statement, and I'd love for you to tell us why we should vote for you for mayor on June 14th. So Miranda, we get to go with you first.
So Minot does many things really well, but there's always room for improvement. As I canvassed our community and spoke with people, I clearly heard the concerns of the residents, and I believe that we can do better. But the people can do better. It doesn't necessarily have to be the people sitting at this dais, and I want to put that out to the community. You have a responsibility as a citizen as well. You have a responsibility to investigate the people that are on your ballot to determine who's the candidate that best aligns with your views, but then also to follow through with that and to hold us accountable. So with that, I hope that I would earn your vote. I appreciate the ability to serve publicly, and I look forward to June 14th.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Tom, why should we vote for you on June 14th?
When you look at, when there's a desire for change, when there's a need for change, you look back on the past 4 years and you judge it as a report card. I think the decisions made by the past mayor, the judgment calls by the past mayor, or the current mayor, I apologize, there's room and there's opportunity for improvement. There were some poor decisions made. I'm going to change that. This is going to be a government that's open. If you make an effort to come to a city council meeting, if you make that effort to be involved in our city government, you're not going to be turned away from the microphone. You're going to be able to address the city. I'm going to encourage a culture of service to this community. My yard signs, my billboards, they all say it, together we can, and I really believe that. Together we can make this community better, and it's not about me, it's all about we. So please vote for me.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Shaun, close us off here. Why should we vote for you on June 14th?
Thank you, Mark. I think I alluded to this earlier. When you take the position of mayor, there's no book that says, congratulations, you've been elected, here's everything you need to know how to do. I think some of the comments that were alluded to are 2 points out of an entire 4 years, maybe 3 points out of an entire 4 years. There's been so much good that has gone on in this community over the last 4 years that I hope I'm judged by the holistic report card. That you take a look at all of the substantial effort and success that has come because of that out at the state, down at the state legislature, with the relationships at Minot Air Force Base and the hard work and at oftentimes moment notice being able to stand in front of some of the most important people in this country and stand and represent Minot to its absolute best. I do have a gift for that, and I will continue to work with the full council, whoever that council is, and with the entire community for the best Magic City that we can be.
Okay, thank you to the candidates again. Thank you, Tom, Shaun, and Miranda. Thank you to everyone else for joining us tonight for the Minot Area Chamber EDC Government Affairs Committee Candidate, Mayoral Race Candidate Forum, and have a good night.